On today's episode, we make not one, but two silicone molds. Act now, cause supplies are running out. Hey guys, Michael here with Michael Makes Everything. So today we are going to recast the mold that got screwed up on the last video. And we're going to go ahead and do the second one as well. So I've done molds before, but I definitely didn't have any luck the last time. If you saw the video, you saw what a disaster it was. So this time round, I have glued my Lego block walls actually down to these pieces of like a whiteboard. It's a dry erase board, picked it up from Home Depot, and I cut them into these small squares. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate out how much silicone we actually need. So I do this by using grains of rice. So you can see the bag of grains of rice on the table there along with my cup. So I'm just going to pour out some of these rice grains into my Lego block mold, and then we'll just kind of vibrate them to get them to seat as low into the mold as we can possibly get. This will give us a pretty accurate measurement of the volume of this mold. So I sped up the video a little bit here just because we don't need to take a ton of time while I do this, but once I've got the grains of rice vibrated down into the mold, then I'm gonna dump them out onto the paper towel. After I can kind of dump them out on the paper towel, we'll pour them out into the cup, and then we'll draw a line on our disposable plastic solo cup. You just want to make sure that you get all the grains of rice out of your mold, because anything that's left behind is going to screw up your silicone. So here's the rice going into my solo cup, and we're going to vibrate this cup one more time as well, just to make sure that this rice is sitting as far into the bottom of the cup as it can be. After a few seconds, just shaking that down with the little vibration table, we'll take our Sharpie, and we're going to go ahead and draw a line around the cup, just to represent where the rice is. Now this line can be at the level of the rice or slightly below the level of the rice, and it won't make a lick of difference, because we're going to add a little bit of volume to the volume of the silicone when we add the activator to it, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So don't waste the rice. I mean, come on, we all have to pinch some pennies. There's no reason why you can't reuse it. I'm just sealing it back up in my Ziploc bag, and I'll use it again later today. So now that we've got the line on the cup, we're going to give our activator a shake there, and I'm going to throw that on the vibration table and let it vibrate. That'll get any bubbles that we just shook into it out of it, but we want to make sure to shake it up so that it's really well mixed for us. Otherwise, we would have issues with adding extra air into our mix, which would certainly give us a bubbly looking silicone mold. So I'm grabbing the silicone right now, and you can see it's the same large bucket that I used in my last video. So I bought the silicone this way, and this is Somooth-On silicone, mold making silicone. I bought it as the large bucket just simply because it is a lot cheaper to buy it this way, but it is a lot more difficult to pour, so just keep that in mind. If you want to save a little money, you follow in my footsteps and buy it in the large bucket. but I probably will go back to buying the small containers, just simply because I don't make large molds. I'm only making small molds, and the small containers are so nice to pour. It's so much easier than this. Give it a good stir. The silicone, I've not really seen it separate, but I'm sure it does. And you want to make sure it's real well mixed before we actually use it. I'm stirring from the bottom, pulling the stuff up to the top, and then giving it a good stir through, just to make sure that I don't have any issues with the mix. Once you've got it good and stirred, we're going to pour it into the cup to the line that we marked a minute ago. So here I'm just scraping off the paint stirrer that I used to mix this back into the bucket, so that we're not wasting a bunch of the silicone. The bucket, you know, you've got a hell of a lot in it, but I still want to try and use as much of this as we possibly can and not be wasteful. So we'll go ahead now and we're going to pour off our silicone into the cup. Do this real slowly, and if you are able to do it from a high distance, it's better, just simply because the thinner the stream that you're pouring into the cup, the more of the bubbles that are going to pop as you pour. And these are the bubbles that we just introduced into the silicone by giving it a good stir. By the way, this is the Mold Max 14NV. That's the name of this particular silicone from Somooth-On. I like this one because you do not need a degassing chamber. You're able to just pour this into your mold and give it a shake, and it does just fine. It really gets rid of the bubbles just fine on its own. But they do make other silicones that are a little bit more durable than this one. But with that, you have the added step of having to degas the silicone. And that's just a vacuum chamber that you're going to pull a vacuum on the silicone before you pour it to get the bubbles out of it. Up to you which way you want to go. I didn't want to make the investment in a vacuum chamber. I just didn't think that it was worth my money. So it's real important to add the actual activator by weight. So what we are doing now is I've got my scale. I took an empty cup and I'm zeroing out the scale for the weight of the cup. So once that's done, throw your cup with the silicone in it onto the scale and take a measurement. So in this case, we are coming up with 205, I believe. Yeah, 205. So that means that we need to add 20.5 grams of our activator. It's a 10-to-1 ratio. So we're going to just say 20 or 21 with that. You're not going to really be able to get all the way down to 0.5 of a gram. So zero your scale again and then add your activator, and you can see I poured that into an empty cup just to make this easier to pour. There is something about that blue container of activator that just makes it virtually impossible to pour. So I stopped at 20 here, which will do just fine for us, and I'm just pouring back the extra activator back into our container. And I keep saying activator because it's a two-part silicone, part A and a part B, and the actual silicone itself, the white product, that will not dry until the activator is added and thoroughly mixed through. So we are now on to mixing it, and once again we're going to speed up this video here in a second, But you are going to mix this stuff for exactly 5 minutes until it is totally and completely blended. With this, you can see the stirrer I'm using it's a laboratory stir that's made out of stainless steel, and it is really easy to get into all the little nooks and crannies of the cup and keep that stirrer clean. I would definitely recommend for I think it was $1.50 that I spent on that thing with Amazon. Order yourself one if you're doing this kind of job. You will be glad to have it. Because a paint stick, as much as that works really well for the large bucket, does not work really well for a small little solo cup like this. And if you're doing small silicone molds, you are not working in big batches. So scrape off the excess just like you did with the bucket, and then we are ready to spray our mold with a mold release agent. So we're going to use both a spray on and a brush on. So you can see I'm just stepping off to the side real quick and spraying this on the floor, just so that I don't get this greasy mold release all over my workbench. Once you've got it sprayed, we're going to take a little bit of the brush on version, and we're going to brush this on to our mold as well. Now these pieces in the mold that I'm doing right now, these are stacked. It's 1.5 inches high, and these are 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch stone block wall pieces. So at 1.5 inches high, it's the perfect height to make the legs around a door frame with an arched top. That's why I'm doing this. But it's a lot faster to pour these as whole pieces than to pour them as 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch blocks, where I need literally 3 blocks every time. So I have to pour that mold, I don't know, 6 times before I get the pieces I need to make one door frame. You can see why I'm making this mold. So because these are taller, that's why I'm adding the brush on mold release agent as well. Now the brush on is exactly the same as the spray on, it just puts it on a little heavier. And you may be asking, well, why am I doing both? Well, I'm doing both just simply because the spray can sometimes get into like a little nook and cranny that the brush on doesn't. But the brush on goes on heavier, so it generally does make it easier to pull the parts back out later. If you've ever had something where it totally doesn't stick, you know the importance of it, of a mold release agent. That feeling of being able to just get that part out later is priceless compared to the mold release agent's cost. So now that I have both the brush on and the spray on, I'm adding another spray on coat real quick, and then I will when I come back to the table, I will let this whole coat dry. So we've got 5 minutes on the timer, and we sped up just to get that done quickly. Once the release agent has a chance to dry, there we go, last 10 seconds. So once that agent has a chance to dry, we are ready to pour our silicone. Now don't worry about mixing that silicone ahead of time and then letting it sit. That silicone has a 45-minute to an hour work time in my experience. So the 5 minutes, 10 minutes that it took you to do this is not going to affect this at all. So we're starting to do our pour right now, and the instructions tell you to pour it at the lowest spot in the mold. I've always found that as long as your table is balanced really level, really doesn't matter where you pour it. And if you pour it in the middle, it'll fill evenly out to the sides, so you don't have to wait for the silicone to actually move from the low spot all the way to the other side of your mold. But do what you think is best. For me, that's pour it right in the middle. And you can see I'm trying to pour it fairly high from my mold. I've got at least 16 inches there of distance between where I'm pouring from and the top edge of the mold. And the reason I do that is because the stream of the silicone gets to a very, very fine stream, and it allows all of the bubbles that I worked into that silicone when I stirred it for 5 minutes to have a chance to pop before you pour them in, and you'll get a mold with a lot less bubbles in the finished product by doing it this way. So we're covering up over our pieces, and our pieces are glued down to the dry erase board just like the Lego block walls are. So the top of the mold, the finished mold, is actually the bottom of what you're pouring. And what you see there as effectively the top, that's going to be really the bottom of your mold. So just think about it, you're doing everything kind of in reverse. So once we're done pouring, we're going to transfer our mold over to the vibration table and clamp down the whiteboard to the surface of the vibration table. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that into the center of this table just so that you guys have a better view of it. But you see I'm putting some putty knives as wedges under the back edge of my vibration table, just because my workbench has an ever so slight bow in the middle of the table compared to the edges, so I have to compensate for that. So I'm just adding a few more drops of the silicone just to top this off. As it has an opportunity to settle a little bit, you'll see that you need just a little bit more just to fill it up. But we, with our measurement trick, got really close to using up every last little drop of silicone that we mixed out of this cup, and that's the real goal. We don't want to waste any, we want to just use it up. So I've got the vibration table on. We are going to set our timer now for 45 minutes. So with 45 minutes on the clock, we are going to skip ahead here in just a sec, and we will cut to the point where we are all done with this dry process. So 45 minutes, you'd shut off the vibration table, and then we're talking 4 hours for it to fully cure, and you can actually then remove the Lego blocks. So that's where we're at right now. We are fully cured now that we've cut the video back in. So we are going to start to demold this this mold. So with the demolding process, if you're using the Lego block wall technique like what I'm using, one of the block removers really does help, but they're not too difficult. The only thing that's really difficult to pull off of this are the ones that you glued down on the bottom. And for that glue, you want to use a smooth surface glue. I like the Aleene's smooth surface glue. It's a nice product. But all the rest of the Lego blocks, none of those are glued. The only thing that holds them together is just the mechanics of Lego. You know, they will hold on their own. Now, for me, I've made quite a few molds now with only one that actually turned out to be a disaster, and I have found that because that mold release agent is so greasy, that the Lego blocks, the longer that I do molds, the greasier they get and the less they want to stick and lock together. So if you have a dishwasher or washing machine and a bag that you can throw those Lego blocks in and wash them, that solved the issue totally for me. And you'll be able to clean them up and actually use them again. So I'm just popping Lego blocks right now, and as soon as we're done this, we will go ahead and pull this whole mold off of the base, and we will try and get the parts that we cast out of this mold. And you can see that there is some leakage of the silicone. It leaks out in between the Lego blocks. And that's all stuff that you're going to want to clean off of there just to make this mold a little neater and a little more precise looking. So we're just going to continue on here and try to get all these blocks, and I'm going to speed up the video a little bit just to make this go a little faster. So I'm just cleaning things up as I go, and making sure that that we are nice and neat. And the hardest part comes, of course, once you get all of the little ooze out of the silicone ripped off of there, and that is pulling the silicone off of the board. So this is a dry erase board, but remember that your pieces, although they are glued down, these are extra deep pieces, so they're going to have a tendency to want to grip the mold rather than the dry erase board. So you can see what happened. I went to pull it off, and all 4 of the pieces pulled in the mold with it. So demolding the pieces at this point gets a little tricky. So I'm flexing the mold and I'm trying to push the pieces out from underneath. And this is where that mold release agent is so critical. So we're just kind of spreading and pulling and stretching the silicone mold a little bit just to be able to get these pieces out of there. And the first one didn't go too badly, but that second one's being a pain. So you can see I moved on, and this one actually broke when I went to pull it, the glue joint, because remember, each of these pieces I'm removing are made up of 3 small 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch blocks. So if memory serves me right, we've got Aleene's Tacky glue, which glued these together, and he usually does a pretty good job, but every once in a while it lets go, and I had 2 pieces that separated trying to pull it out of the mold, and we're actually going to wind up using a pair of pliers to get one of the pieces out. So I've got it pushed up to the surface, but it's just so small that I can't quite get a handhold on it. And you want to be real careful, because anything that you use to pull that piece out, you don't want to do damage to the mold doing it. So I have a pair of jeweler's pliers here that I'm grabbing this piece out with. So once you get a hold of it, then you're able to safely remove it without causing any issues with the mold at all. So here's our completed mold. I'm just doing a little cleanup here, and I'll switch over to a pair of scissors in a second here and clean, you know, this mold up a little more. But we are ready to cure it now. And by cure it, I mean we have to heat this mold for 4 hours so that the silicone finishes off gassing. So the best temperature for it is 140 degrees, which unfortunately is more than my bread proofer and less than my oven can do. So what I found was that if I used the dehydrator, which I use to dry out the pieces that I cast, and I leave the lid cracked about halfway open, it's a perfect temperature to cure these silicone molds. So now that we've pretty much finished up cleaning this mold, we can go ahead and cure it. So for the remainder of this video, I essentially do the same process that you just saw, where I take the second mold, which is deeper, and I'm going to pour silicone to it, and go ahead and run the extra mold. But because it's really a duplication of the same thing that I just showed you, the remainder of this video I am going to speed it up just so that you can see it, but not so much that it makes this video super long. I think that this video will still be my longest video. So we'll go ahead and we'll speed this up, and we'll see you in a bit. Alright guys, we're back, and if you've stuck with us to this point, I just want to thank you for sticking it out to the end of the video. You are in the rarity of the YouTube viewers. So I am just cleaning this up a little bit, and this will finish up our second of the two molds that we were making today. And like I said, you know, the second one pretty much did the same technique we did for the first one. You saw the sped up version of that, but there's really no difference between them. And now I'm just popping it over into the dehydrator to cure it. So thank you guys so much for watching this. This is actually the 50th video to go up on Michael Makes Everything. So I appreciate you guys checking it out, and make sure to leave me any questions or comments in the description below.
Remember, if you like our video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you can see more great videos like this.